Everybody, welcome into Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. My name is Brandon Adams. Good to have you with us. Happy to be joined by the rest of the Dog Nation team as well. Jeff Sentell, Mike Griffith, and Connor Riley. We're going to have a lot of fun on tonight's broadcast, looking at some of the Georgia players who made and some of the ones who didn't make the preseason All-SEC team that was released on Thursday. Georgia uniforms, that's going to be a lot of fun. We'll get into that here coming up in just a couple of minutes too. But before any of that, though, breaking with Cover 4 presented by Georgia Farm Bureau Protocol, an extra topic off the top, late breaking news, just as we're getting ready to go on the air, the NCAA granting, essentially reversing course on an earlier decision, eligibility for former Georgia offensive lineman Cade Mays at Tennessee. Of course, he will now have to await an SEC decision to actually be on the field playing this fall, but a hurdle has been leapt over by Cade Mays. Mike Griffith, you've covered the story for a long time. You obviously have close connections in the city of Knoxville as well. For Georgia fans who follow this story, it sort of seems like it never ends. What do you make of the latest chapter in this saga?
You know, I don't know that it's news that the NCAA cleared him. I think it's news that Jeremy Pruitt announced that to the world. It looks to me like Tennessee is trying to turn the heat up on the SEC offices. Remember last week, Jeremy identified the associate assistant athletic director in the SEC office by name who handles this, some random guy nobody's ever heard of. So it's pretty clear that Tennessee is trying to put the spotlight on the SEC and pressure the SEC, get the Vol Nation and the Vol Twitter folks to go after the SEC and apply this pressure. Because BA, I mean, this is an SEC rule. You don't see kids who transfer in conference get eligible.
Yeah, so I don't agree that Mays should be eligible. But, Jeff, I will say that the way that Jeremy Pruitt is playing this is the way I'd want my coach to be playing it. I think Mike's right by going public and saying they've gotten the NCAA nod that they need, essentially putting pressure now on the SEC to make their decision public, or at least explain why they've chosen not to grant the eligibility. I think this is an aggressive ploy on the part of Jeremy Pruitt. It's kind of an alpha move. And while I don't agree that Mays ought to be playing for the Vols this season, you know, Pruitt's doing what an SEC coach should do. He's being an advocate for his own program. So from that standpoint, I guess, I don't know, what is it? I won't use any phrases, but you know, the point is I'm sort of fine with what Pruitt's doing here, even if I don't necessarily agree with the overall outcome.
Yeah, Brandon, if you know Jeremy Pruitt at all, and you know kind of his upbringing from his Alabama roots, you kind of knew that Jeremy was going to bow up and do the double A gap blitz with this sort of thing, especially to get a guy like Cade Mays, an enforcer, a mercenary type on his offensive line, eligible, and to stack up on that, what looks to be a pretty stout offensive line. I kind of agree with Mike. This is really not a news factor here. I think the NCAA can decree him eligible. It's good that some of those furloughed employees are doing something during the month of September. But, you know, for me, I just don't know. You know, I always thought the SEC eligibility was going to be a big thing, kind of echoing what Mike said there a little bit, because that transfer in conference is something that is pretty daunting. It would usually involve whether the transferring school, the place where the young man is leaving from, would have to give him a release. Certainly that's kind of helping an SEC East rival opponent there. But can I just be frank? I mean, you know, there's so much positive goodwill right now in my world that, you know, any good karma, Cade Mays get eligible, play your junior season, get that thing done. Everybody seems like they want to play football now except for the Pac-12. So I don't know. I guess right now I'm just in a good mood this week with a lot of things that are progressing forward. And, you know, if in some small miracle, Tennessee can convert a 3rd and 39 and get Cade Mays eligible to be a great asset on their offensive line, more power to it.
Connor, you know meme culture. Is that portly Mets fan that does the thumbs down? Yeah. I'm that guy right now. Because, listen, honestly, if a guy like Cade Mays can leave Georgia, go be eligible right away at a place like Tennessee, then what's to stop every SEC team from starting to pander with – or not pander, that's the wrong word. Tamper, that's the word I'm looking for. Pandering is a whole different thing. There's plenty of that in the SEC too. Yeah. But tamper, if Mays can leave a place where he's the starter and go be a starter right away at a new school, then to me that just essentially deputizes every coach in the SEC to start tampering with everybody else's roster. Listen, you know, I get that you're not, as an adult, supposed to, forbid a college football player from having anything they want now. I realize now that they get to be free to do whatever they want to at any point in time, even if the thing they want to do contradicts the thing they just did. I realize there's no ability to tell a college football player anything anymore, but I don't think there's something so wrong with telling Cade Mays, sorry, hon, you're going to have to sit out a year there at Tennessee.
Brendan, did you just say hun? Did you just say hun there? Did you really just say that? Come on, man.
One, I just want to get, we're talking a little fashion here. Jeff matching his shirt with his couch cushions to make it look like his head's floating, really getting into that spirit as we get into the fall. I know Mike Griffith saw it and noticed it. This is a great visual. Back to Cade Mays a little bit here. Yes, we've seen transfer and the sort of reaction to transfers shift in recent years, but Mays feels very different, even so much so from the Justin Fields transfer, in that if this is allowed and it goes through, it establishes in my opinion, a scary precedent where if you're a starter at one school, you can still face no repercussions for that in transferring to another school. And at that point, the whole lid is off the box when it comes to transfers and what that establishes. And it's slippery slope, scary precedent, whatever judicial term you want to use here. I would advise that the SEC, I think, be careful in this in terms of what it may establish going forward, because if they grant Cade Mays this, and I'm sort of with Jeff, I don't really care if Cade Mays is the reason Tennessee beats Georgia this year. Georgia has way bigger problems than that, quite frankly. So I'm not too concerned about whether he is eligible or not, but I think from a bigger macro scope, it does potentially set up a scary precedent for me if this does end up happening.
So Michael Porter, Connor, is watching on YouTube, and he's basically wanting to be filled back in on the facts again. You wrote the story this afternoon for DogNation.com. Jeff and Mike were, I guess questioning the story a little bit, but isn't it at least something that on the basis of what the lawyer has done lately, the NCAA is at least kind of reverse course in this, right? I mean, there is something with that, right?
Yeah, they've cleared one of the hurdles right now. They've cleared, in my opinion, I think the biggest hurdle when it comes to this is in getting that NCAA to change course. Turning the NCAA is like turning a steamship sometimes, and that it's very tough to do. So they've cleared that hurdle. They've now got the SEC to appeal to. Jeremy Pruitt, again, almost instantaneously after announcing the news that the NCAA had sort of granted that waiver, he began trying to pitch to Greg Sankey about why he should be eligible. Pruitt did say that there's no timetable as far as when he gets cleared might be. I'd be very interested to see how close this decision comes to October 10th. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be super stunned if this decision came on October 11th, much like the Joey Gatewood with Auburn, Kentucky drama. I wouldn't be surprised if that news theoretically came out September 27th, the day after those two teams played.
Hey, Jeff, let me do one more thing on this, then I want to talk about the new uniforms for a moment. So much of this story reminds me, it's not a perfect comparison, but so much of this reminds me of the way that Kirby Smart flexed when he first took the Georgia job in 2016 to get Maurice Smith eligible at Georgia after he transferred from Alabama. That, to me, back then was a former subordinate to Saban showing that it didn't work for Nick anymore. This is a little bit different because Pruitt did not work for Kirby Smart. But clearly this is Jeremy Pruitt establishing himself as a guy who's going to try to work on his own behalf there at Tennessee. So no matter how this ends up working out, and, frankly, I'm not quite so sure Mays is going to be quite as impactful for Tennessee as Maurice Smith was for Georgia in 2016. He was Georgia's defensive MVP that season. But there is a little bit of shades of what Smart did with Maurice Smith here in 2016 for me.
For me, Brandon, and I like how you use the word flex. Let's all on our bingo chart for Brandon in cool hip terms for this week's cover 4. Let's all make sure we get the free space, and now we've got flex involved. But, Brandon, for me, I think this is just handwriting on the wall, man. I see a day coming up pretty clear where everybody's going to get one free transfer. Maybe 3-5 years from now, I think that should be done by then. And this just might be it. It just might be it early. And, I do see, Maurice Smith was a great boon to the Georgia program. He probably made a difference in 1 or 2 wins that season. In another,
they didn't have
really
that many in 2016,
season.
so they had to take as many as they could get.
Yeah, they couldn't use him to get by Vanderbilt. I certainly remember that one, and I remember how boring that Louisiana Lafayette game was, and everybody remembers that picture of Notori Johnson kind of like that in the middle of that game. But I just kind of see the handwriting on the wall that sooner or later everybody's going to have these one free spaces in terms of transfers.
All right, it's Cover 4 Live. presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. That's Jeff Sentell, Mike Griffith, Connor Riley. I'm Brandon Adams. Good to have all of you with us here today. Let me shift gears and talk about what we were going to begin the show with, which is the brand new Georgia uniforms that were unveiled. Now, there are a lot of tentacles that this story takes, including some of the things we found out after the uniforms were initially revealed, which I think kind of takes some of the air out of the balloon a little bit. But if we can have some fun here for a moment, let's work up and build up some of that kind of stuff. Mike, let me begin with just the basic level. Georgia bringing back the red pants, the white jersey for a game, the black jerseys with the silver breeches. You got the dog collar thing. And in fact, I'm not sure, what we have available. Let me just try to do this here for a second. So here's what the red and white looks like for the people watching at home. There that it is right there. Normally we have, fancier graphics, and then I'll just show that
love
up
it.
today.
Yeah, going above and beyond.
There's the black jerseys there for a moment. Mike, do you like the uniforms?
I think they're effectual. I mean, in terms of what Georgia wants to accomplish, I mean, I like the message for equality and togetherness on the jersey. I would guess that's probably the initiative that sold Kirby Smart on doing it. This is probably something the players came to him with and said, Coach, we would like to make this gesture. And, why not honor the 1980 team? It's been 40 years, and they're going to honor the 1980 team with those red pants. And, of course, Herschel Walker, we all remember him running over Billy Bates in the 1980 opener against Tennessee.
Well, Connor does remember
there's a connection there.
Connor does remember that. And I was barely alive then, so I've seen the highlights of that. But let's not all put us in the category of remembering that fateful day back in 1980, because some of us remember that a little less than others do.
We're all aware.
That's a good way to say it.
We're running over Billy Bates in the 1980 Tennessee opener at Tennessee. And I like it. And I'm not sure how that's going to mesh with those maroon Arkansas jerseys, the Alabama wannabe colors that Arkansas wears. It's just but it's going to look pretty cool. And I like those. And I like the black jerseys too. So I say it's a good move. I like it. And I think that Kirby was probably motivated by his players to do that.
Connor, before we get into some of the things we found out like in the last few hours, do you like the uniforms? You like the dog collar? You like the patches? Do you like the uniforms?
So give me 2 seconds here.
Connor's going prop on us here.
I'm getting props. As our foremost fashion expert here at Dog Nation, I do want to say overall, I do like the uniforms in general. I like the road ones a little bit more. I think those look a lot cleaner. I love the red pants sort of matching the red helmet there. My only complaint about the white uniforms is the stripes on the side. They look a little too much like Ohio State to me. The bigger issue I have is with the little things on the black jersey. I don't particularly love the collar. I think it's a little weird. And they have the bulldog on the shoulder pads, but it's not. It's the more updated modern cartoony bulldog. The bulldog I want to see on the sides is this bulldog right here. The older, fiercer-looking bulldog. That's the one that I want. If you're going to put a modern bulldog on the side of the uniforms, you might as well just put Spike's cartoon head on there. I mean, what are we doing here?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear Connor, the youngest person on the team, say that, Jeff, because the two things that I liked about the uniforms least, I hate to sound like 1,000 years old. I don't like the Spike dog collar. Listen, if people do, then I want people to have what they want. I'm fine with that. I don't really like the dog collar. And of all the logos that Georgia has, that kind of newfangled dog that's on the shoulder sleeve, Jeff, I got to admit that's not my favorite rendition of the Georgia logo either. So those two things, not to sound like Grandpa here, but those two things with the uniform, I have to say, I don't really like all that much.
Oh, Brandon, what if I told you those logos were 5-star magnets? Would you feel better about that, man? Would you feel better about that if that's bringing them in there?
Yeah, I mean, listen, generally speaking, I like the uniforms. It's just those two particular aspects I'm not in favor of.
Well, it's funny how, Connor is youthful exuberance. He just had to go straight to the negative. He just had to get right in there. And I think Brandon wanted us to get out maybe to the par 5 or the par 4 before we started teeing off on what we don't like about the uniforms. But dagnabbit, this is about as ornery as I'm ever going to get on one of these programs, man, and especially half full Jeff here a lot of times. But to me, Georgia just can't get these uniforms right. I feel like, Lucy and Charlie Brown always pulling the football away. Like, you get this great red, white, and by the way, all the recruits I've talked to today about the uniforms, guys, they tell me they like that red and white combo more than anything else. That's the favorite one right there. They're excited by it, but you know what? I didn't have the heart to tell them that, okay, dude, Arkansas game is going to be a one-off. That's the only time you're going to see that. And then maybe I think because of the great message for equality, social justices that will be portrayed for most of the those good narratives in the 2020 football season, I think you'll get to see the black jerseys at least once, maybe twice. But for all those guys that are sitting there going, man, I can't wait to get myself in that and get in that, I don't know if it's going to happen. And it's just more uniform trickeration for the University of Georgia. Start getting you feeling good about it, and all of a sudden they're like, not so fast, my friends. This one's only going to be for Arkansas. This one might only be for the Auburn Soldier Boy game. Maybe they'll at least crank that over the PA loudspeaker when Georgia plays Auburn again. They wear the black jerseys. But I'm sitting there looking at that red and white ensemble. Connor, I actually do like the piping that they have on over the biceps there, because it reminds me of Carney Norris, that 1980 Georgia team with all those great stalwarts right there that pulled out the win. Jeff Sanchez, Terry Hogue, Frank Ross, on and on and on, all those guys. That's the way Georgia looked before, kind of Ohio State kind of has the vernacular right now, Brandon. Man, I just wish we could get those things in a rotation. Not saying every week, but maybe a couple of times a year you'd see the alternate jerseys.
Mike, it is a little – go ahead, Connor.
So, one, I think the thing with the black jerseys, and I've been pro black jersey, the thing that made those original ones so sweet was just how simple they were. There was no friv, no extras. It was just straight black, and it looked really good when they played Auburn in 2007. As far as the red pant road jerseys, we talk a lot about tradition on here, and Mike, I'm just going to go ahead. We're not talking about moving Georgia and Florida out of Jacksonville. But what if, as a tradition, for the first road game Georgia plays every year, they came out in the red pants, red helmet look? I
love it. I mean, listen, I love the red pants, the white jersey, and I do like the red stripe because it is kind of a throwback. I'd love that to be Georgia's road uniform. I'd love it. I think that'd be great. But, Mike, do you agree with Jeff on this that they get a lot of fanfare for making the announcement, and then later on you find out they're like barely going to wear them, and in the case of the black jerseys, maybe they continue to be kind of like the ceremonial dress blues of Georgia football, something that only comes out, for photographs, not a combat uniform. I mean, isn't that kind of stepping on the message a little bit when you later on find out these cool uniforms that, for the most part, I think were very well received? Georgia's actually not going to really wear them very much, or if at all, in the case of the black jerseys.
If you're going to go alternate, you might as well go all the way. They should have black pants and a black helmet when they wear the black and just go blackout. I mean, that would look really cool. But trying to mix sort of an alternate with it's like, look, they're all in or you're all out. I mean, that's what makes color combinations so cool is, the Ducks go all in or all out. And that's what makes it so shocking and effective. And with black and red, there's just so many great things Georgia could do with it. I think an all black look would have looked great with a black helmet. I know we've seen that black helmet before, but to me, it's like, why stop there with the jersey? Just go all out with it, make a statement, have that intimidating look. But they just kind of went half in. And then the red and white, I know Jeff said that the high school guys liked it. Well, that's good because it looks like a high school uniform. It doesn't look professional or collegiate at all.
What a day!
Preposterous.
Mike, that is preposterous. That is Georgia's uniform. I mean, that was their uniform. It's a throwback uniform. That's what it's supposed to look like.
I love it from Mike with the heat.
Jeff is right. That is
insane. I don't like the stripes on the sleeve. I want to clean. If we're going throwback, let's go with a cleaner look.
But that's what. But hold on, you can't have a throwback to something that didn't exist. They are throwing back to what the uniform looked like then. I mean, the old Mitchell and Ness thing from a few years ago that everybody was wearing the Herschel Walker jerseys. They got the red stripe on the sleeve. That is what the uniforms look like. It'd be like saying, I want a throwback Yankees uniform, but I don't want a pinstripe down the front. That's what the uniform looks like.
Yeah,
Mike, and hey, the consumer economy speaks here. These jerseys are currently available for sale. We're not going to say where because that'd be freeplugville.com. But the white jersey, $134.99. Definitely a premium placed on all that nostalgia compared to $99 for the new spike collar.
Well, that's because most people already have a black jersey, Jeff. They already have a black jersey of some
They don't have the dog collar. Come on.
Some people aren't going to want that.
Yeah, I don't like the dog collar. Now, that's the one thing I'll be Scrooge about is I don't love the dog collar. Hey, finish this topic for us, though, Jeff. obviously we've seen, recruiting very much, hampered by coronavirus, dead period extending now through January. Does something like this, both the social media buzz on a day like today, the actual wearing of the uniforms, assuming that ever happens, beyond just the one time against Arkansas, does this help Georgia recruiting? Do you think you can draw a line towards that?
Well, I think that they better get all the juice they can out of these jerseys, because a lot of these recruits won't even get to try them on unless it's ceremonial in the locker room. I mean, maybe they can do something like some of these eyewear manufacturers do these days, where you can virtually try on the frames while you upload a picture of yourself. I'm still holding out for this uniform crazy 2020. I'm still holding out for Georgia breaking out black jerseys in Mercedes-Benz Stadium as the home team for Georgia versus Alabama. And I want a viral Scott Cochran video the week of touting the phrase funeral. And we don't care about no stinking, motivations or whatever. We're here to play some ball. Now, if you want to make Georgia football feel like a WWE Jimmy Hart promoter steel cage match that I know speaks to your heart, Brandon, that's where the thing needs to go with the black jerseys. Get Georgia playing Alabama. Can't do that in Tuscaloosa, but maybe they can for the home game in the Dome. Get Georgia rocking those black jerseys and say, we don't care about what happened in 2012. We don't care about what happened. We care about what's happening right now.
Connor, at the risk of being negative, was it a mistake to put the 40-year national championship patch on there?
A little cringy. I know when we were talking earlier today, it was one of the first things you thought of. You thought Tech and Florida were going to troll them, but I like it. It is something worth honoring. It's just unfortunate that Georgia hasn't gotten back there. But I still, overall, I like the jerseys, even if it is just one or two games. I like what they're doing with this, and I hope this isn't just a one-year thing, but something they do every year going forward.
Yeah, I will say, I thought today was I'll let you finish, Jeff, but the reaction today was a ton of fun. The video that Georgia did is worth going out of your way to see. Very well done. The uniforms themselves, I think 90% of the uniforms are gorgeous. Obviously, the color schemes I think are amazing. So, today at least was very fun. Breaking these things out, I guess, against Arkansas, I think it's going to be a blast, making what otherwise might be, a little bit of a weird game feel even more, a little more jacked up. So I've had a lot of fun with it, and I'd love to see, a little more of this in Georgia's future. Jeff, final thought from you.
Yeah, let's do our best to make sure we inform as well. Everybody, when they saw the 100 patch on, I believe it was the black look right there, it started me wondering, what are they doing 100 years for? Is it 100 years of anniversary of their first unbeaten team? That was also 1920, but it was actually, and I bet that patch will stay the whole year if they wear those black togs a couple of times, but it's the 100-year anniversary of the Bulldog nickname. And for a lot of devout Georgia fans that have Georgia rooms out there, I bet most people did not know that the Bulldog nickname was turning 100 this year.
I will say, every single student that goes to Georgia knows that the nickname was not initially the Bulldogs. They know for a fact that it is the Billy Goats, because they are so proud to tell you that when you stop by Hurdy Field on a tour, that actually, the team name wasn't always the Bulldogs. It was the Georgia Billy Goats.
That is true. I've heard a lot of people talking about that in the past there as well. So 100 years of Bulldogs commemorated on a patch on the Georgia uniform. Discover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. I'm Brandon Adams. Happy to have Mike Griffith, Connor Riley, Jeff Sintel on hand. Big thanks to our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau for making it all possible. Our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau live and work and play in communities just like yours all over our great state, doing great things, supporting the agricultural programs around our state, but also helping you save money on home, auto, and life insurance. They do great work to make sure that's there for you and available for you. And who doesn't want to save big when it comes to insurance? So check out our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau. They are always the home team. You can find them online at gfbinsurance.com. That's gfbinsurance.com. That'll get you in touch with Georgia Farm Bureau, and we really appreciate them making Cover 4 Live possible here tonight. All right, let's shift gears. Look at our next topic here on Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. A number of dogs were released on the preseason All-SEC team that came out today. Was this media or was this coaches that vote on this? Coaches vote on this. So here's who we got. Jordan Davis, first team. Richard LeCount, first team. Trey Hill, second team, along with George Pickens, Malik Herring, N'Kobe Dean, Eric Stokes, and Jake Camarda getting in there as the punter. And then Nolan Smith makes the third team All-SEC defense, according to the coaches there as well. Obviously, there's a huge case to be made that these names, many of them at least anyway, will be on the end of season list as well. But Mike Griffith, if I were to ask you, a name that did not, and you've actually got a story up on this at dognation.com, so you'll be working off that wine list a little bit here. But if I were to ask you a name that does not appear on the list that I just read, that's likely to be all SEC at the end of the season, who do you think that is?
I don't know how Azeez Ojulari's not on there. I'm just amazed. The guy was a semifinalist for freshman of the year and didn't make all SEC freshman. I think they just don't know how to spell his name, so they just go, I'll put the other guy on there. I mean, Nolan Smith played behind Azeez Ojulari. Their numbers aren't even close. Azeez led the team with 34 QBPs, quarterback pressures. He had 5.5 sacks. He was the first ever freshman captain. It's like people weren't paying attention. I don't know what this guy's got to do to get attention, but no, I like Azeez to make it. I think James Cook could be on that team at the end of the year. I really think this offense will ultimately run through him.
Jeff, I will say that there is nothing I've heard over the last few days, last couple of weeks, that has caused me to want to pump the brakes too much on James Cook as of yet. And I also don't want to overhype anybody because there's a downside to that potentially. But people told me he was heavily involved in the scrimmage on Saturday, both passing game and the running game. That kind of coincides with some of the other whispers that have been out there. I think James Cook's about as good a name as any in terms of a guy that could be on this list by the end. And by the way, that'd be important for Georgia. You need some offensive guys to step up if you're the Dogs. And, I really am starting to believe, after a couple of years of kind of unrequited promise, I'm really starting to believe that this actually might be Cook's year. I'm pretty high on him for this upcoming season. I think Mike may be right about that.
Yeah, Brandon, I don't think the backs are really well represented there as well, whether it's Zamir, whether it's James Cook. I like an outlier name there as well. And, Mike, you also have to look at all the outside linebackers in the SEC as well. I think Big Cat Bryant was a guy that got his name above Azeez Ojulari in the voting as well. And I don't know, did they go strict outside linebacker, inside linebacker with the voting?
Because
when I looked through him, I saw like a couple of maybe 2 or 3 inside guys there as well, which skewed it a little bit. But Brandon, you want names. I think the name I'm looking at, I mentioned running back, so that's a whiff of Zamir White there as well. But I've got a name that would be great for Georgia that needs to populate those lists. And then everybody might be looking at the Georgia 2020 season as maybe not a bunch of Billy Goats, Connor, but a bunch of goats, the GOAT, for a truly great Georgia season. And I would go Jermaine Johnson. I think that's a guy, should everything click in. Man, I don't know if you guys are hearing the same whispers that I am, but maybe Jermaine might even push Azeez for some time there as well on the field because he's figured it out.
I got to call timeout now. Hold on now. I got to call timeout on this because here's the risk of the offseason conversation where all of us, media fans, everybody in between, has a tendency to sort of take the over on everybody. It stands to reason that Georgia probably won't have 3 outside linebackers make all SEC. So Jermaine Johnson's a good name. But if you say Jermaine Johnson, you're probably not saying Nolan Smith. And Mike, if you say Azeez Ojulari, it's a fine name. He had 5.5 sacks a year ago. As you said before, he's a true leader for the Georgia roster. But if you're saying Azeez Ojulari, you're probably not saying Nolan Smith. So, or you're also not saying Jermaine Johnson. So I'm fine with whoever, but we got to stipulate here, just given the way the outside linebackers rotate, given the fact that you're not going to have a trio from the same team make the All-SEC, at least we talk about the front end of this, that if you're picking Ojulari, you're not picking the other 2. And, Jeff, if you're picking Johnson, you're also not picking the other 2. Can we at least stipulate that there's probably only room for one?
Yeah, I think it was kind of premature for Nolan to be on there anyway. I mean, Nolan's a guy that maybe needs to get where Azeez was a year ago with all those quarterback pressures with his game. And I know he's a fabulous player, Brandon, but Azeez has two or three pegs in the evolutionary cycle ahead of him. And you got Jermaine 6'7", 250. But, while we're sitting here, and I know it's great, back porch fodder to chop this thing up right now, can I just point out one of the big absurdities of this list? I think Eric Gilbert's going to walk on water. I think he's going to be incredible. I think he's going to be an All-American candidate, but I don't want to see his name on a preseason All-SEC team by anybody when he hadn't caught a single stinking pass yet for LSU. And then the distributor of the ball, we don't even know if that guy's going to be much more than a game manager in 2020 as well. It's what it is. It's preseason All-SEC teams. I think the right names were on there. The names that better be on there were the first team guys on defense for Georgia. Brandon, I will say that it's kind of, can I say damning? It's kind of damning right now for Georgia when they look at that, and there wasn't even a whisper of anybody on that first team all SEC offense right now, which speaks to the job ahead for one Todd Monken.
Totally. You're not winning the SEC without first-team offensive guys by the end of the season. It's fine to have nobody on that, at the beginning of the year. It's just fodder for conversations like this. But if you want to win the SEC, you got to put guys on a list like that by the end of the year. I think you're right. Connor, let me bring you in, though, on what these guys were saying a moment ago. I don't have a problem with somebody arguing for Zizo Jalari, nor do I have a problem with somebody arguing for Jermaine Johnson. But these arguments are disqualifying arguments. By touting for one, even if you appreciate the game that all three players bring, by touting for one, you are saying ahead of the other guys. And I got to say, as a fan, it's 3rd and 9. I'm going to have one outside linebacker on the field, just theoretically speaking here. I think I still want it to be Nolan Smith, even though Azeez Ojulari had the better year a year ago.
That's a good take, and I like that. You're not going to have all these guys eating. To use an example on the first team, I'll put money down right now that Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, there will not be 2 Alabama receivers on the first All-SEC team at the end of the year. A guy to throw out there, Jeff mentioned Zamir White. There are not 6 running backs in this league better than Zamir White right now, I kind of believe, and I certainly will believe that'll be true by the end of the season. A guy that I'm going to throw out there, he plays a premium position that's going to get a lot of eyes, a lot of attention. He's got some pedigree behind him, so he's got a name that I think a lot of fans, or at least a lot of plugged-in SEC people know. I think this group is actually going to be maybe a little bit better than some national media types might write them off to be. I would not be surprised. I'm not saying he's going to be first team, but if at the end of the year, Jamari Sawyer is one of the 12 offensive linemen that makes an All-SEC team.
Yeah, and to your point, BA, there in 2018, when Georgia played Alabama in the SEC championship game, they did not have anybody make first team All-SEC AP, that Georgia team that was that close to the playoff.
Yeah.
So that's a great point. Connor, I really thought you were going to go with Tyreek Stevenson. But guys, do we believe there's 15 defensive? Do we believe that there's 15 defensive backs better in the league than Tyson Campbell and DJ Daniel?
Well, the one I was going to mention for the surprise, because I've argued for Campbell over the course of years, but I do think it's kind of fun to put a few chips down on DJ Daniel here. I was told that he played the majority of the scrimmage on Saturday, obviously because Tyson Campbell, for whatever reason, was not out there. I think that Daniel probably had a better year. Maybe some people realize. I thought that Tyson Campbell was having a good year prior to his injury, and then he was kind of hobbled by that for most of probably the final 2/3 of the year, at least maybe 3/4 of the year. But I thought that Daniel really performed pretty well. He got a very nice Albert Breer, I think was one that reported this, has kind of a nice draft grade in his back pocket, kind of already, potentially a 2nd, 3rd round type pick. There are a lot of candidates to potentially make an All-SEC team in the Georgia secondary. And in fact, that's kind of where a lot of the talent on this team, at least in terms of proven commodities, is kind of located at the moment. But I think there's an argument made for Campbell, and I think there's right now a pretty strong argument to be made for DJ Daniel as well. Go ahead, Connor.
So we've been hitting around Georgia needs at least one All-SEC guy on that first-team offense at the end of the year. Does Georgia get one? And I'm assuming they're all, if you say yes, you're going to say Pickens. So my follow-up to that is, who is the second most likely Georgia player to end up on an All-SEC first team at the end of the season?
Zamir. Mike.
I'm going to go Justin Schaefer.
That's interesting. I don't have a hot take for left guards. I'd love to just fire back. Let me tell you something about the left guard. I can name a few of them, but honestly, the conviction in your voice was enough to win me over, Mike. That's pretty impressive. Why did you say Schaefer instead of the other lineman you could have said? I mean, Schaefer's not a bad answer, but why did you say him instead of the lineman you could have said?
Well, he was a guy that Kirby Smart identified in the offseason workouts. He's 330 pounds. He's cemented his spot, whereas Jamari's learning a new spot at left tackle, and there's some more high-profile left tackles. The right tackle spot is kind of up for grabs. Big Ben's got injury history. Trey Hill's getting beat up by freshmen on his own team. And I just don't know enough about Olin Condon. But I think there'll be one Georgia guy that you want to put out there. And I think Justin Schaefer will be – I thought he played well in place of Solomon Kinley too.
What are you about to say, Jeff?
So I got to look at it a different way. And, what you said a second ago, Brandon, don't go sneaking into my secure vault here and buying stealing any of my DJ Daniel stock, man.
Sure.
My DJ Daniel stock is right here, buddy. I'm all on DJ Daniel. I think you can be the best corner Georgia has all year. But my offensive sleeper, which it sounds like we're brewing up here and percolating here a little bit, I like the number 2 receiver because I think everybody's going to find a way to get clamps around or scheme around George Pickens. I like that number 2 receiver is either being a guy like Kyrus Jackson or Jermaine Burton. And I'm not saying this guy's a first-team All-SEC, but I'm saying is a guy that could kind of spit in there with a second-team All-SEC season because I see that guy getting the beneficiary of a lot of man coverage or not a lot of responsibility or assignment football or where for that guy in the scheme with everybody focused on Pickens in the run game. I like that number 2 receiver for Georgia to have a very big year.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unheard of something like that to happen. And if it's not Burton, you run the risk of it being no one. So from that standpoint, it might even be a necessity. Let me ask you guys this very quickly. We're going to move on. So first team quarterback was Kyle Trask, which is kind of a joke to me, but I'll let him have it. Kellen Mond is your second team. And your third team is Bo Nix. Could Georgia conceivably have a quarterback crack the top 3 by the end of the year? I don't even care which quarterback it is. But could Georgia have a quarterback crack the top 3? What's interesting is there's no Alabama quarterback mentioned there. And I would think that between Bryce Young or Mac Jones, one of those 2 guys could have a pretty good year. I'm probably higher on Mon than maybe some of y'all are. And I'm probably higher on Bo Nix than maybe some of y'all are. What are the chances that a Georgia quarterback could crack the top 3 by the end of the year? Something that I don't know that Jake Fromm ever did in his Georgia career, I don't think.
I think it was a preseason, but he was never end of season.
Yeah.
I thought he was second in 2018. I'll look that up again.
Yeah, you may be right, Mike. You may be right.
I'll check that out.
Top 3.
I'd say, Brandon, at one point, I think Georgia had 3 quarterbacks in Athens that were as good as any of those 3 that are right there on that pecking order right now. I think Georgia can definitely, first of all, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they go to third team when they do postseason honors. Do they just go first and second?
That's right. I think he was a preseason third team. So I think you guys are right on the postseason, the top 2 teams. So I stand corrected on that. Yeah.
And it's kind of before you respond. I don't say that to disparage Jake. I just said that to point out it ain't easy to make all SEC quarterback at the end of the year.
Right. No, I actually do because I'm nowhere near as high on Kellen Mond and Bo Nix. I think that's sort of a turd sandwich of first-team quarterbacks there.
Wow.
I think if it's going to be a guy, it's going to be JT Daniels. And I know we're keeping quarterback talk to a minimum tonight. But I think the talent and potential is there. It just needs to be how quickly can his knee get healed and how quickly can he get inserted into this Georgia offense and then what it looks like when he's in there.
Yeah, Mike, for me, the answer of who's more likely to start versus Arkansas compared to who's more likely to be All-SEC by the end of the season, if it leads to possibility, those might be different names for me. I don't know that JT Daniels has done enough, either because of health or whatever else, to fully win the job by the time they go to Arkansas. But if one of these 2 quarterbacks were to play well enough to be on the regional radar by the end of the season and get the attention of SEC voters kind of outside the bubble of Dog Nation, with all due respect to Dwan, whose story I love, I do think that Daniels would be the more likely name in that discussion.
Well, it's a long season, but I would think that if Georgia plays in the SEC championship game, which I think we've all projected, I think Jeff established 7-3 is the worst they can do, but I think we all predicted 9-1. I would agree with that because of the upside if they can get to the air raid, whether as we've talked about, whether it's the knee, whether it's the team not being comfortable yet with the air raid, whether it's the great performances that DeJuan Mathis is having behind closed doors, whatever it is that's going to determine who starts and who plays the majority of game 1. By the end of the year, I do think that the air raid offers the Georgia offense the most upside in terms of explosivity. That would indicate to us that there are playmakers on the perimeter to distribute the ball. You don't want to put everything on a dual threat quarterback. That's an awful lot. And I think that would be a hard load for anybody to carry for 10 full games.
All right, it's Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. That's Mike Griffith you just heard from. My name is Brandon Adams. Happy to have Jeff Sintel and Connor Raleigh with us as well. By the way, don't forget to check out our friends at Georgia Farm Bureau online, gfbinsurance.com. Georgia Farm Bureau, always the home team, saving you money on home, auto, life insurance, also living and working in those communities that you call home there as well. They're essentially your neighbors, and they're also supporting those communities, local agriculture programs, things like that. Georgia Farm Bureau, always the home team. All right, we just talked about offense there for a moment. Let's shift gears, talk defense here. And Jeff Sintel, I was chatting with you a little bit before the show. It sounds like one of the things that you picked up on, one of the things we also featured on Dog Nation Daily this morning, which was Georgia outside linebacker Nolan Smith, the guy that we mentioned a couple of minutes ago. Essentially, I don't want to say guaranteeing that he's not Joe Namath, but he certainly is of the belief that those sacks and tackles for loss, those so-called havoc plays that Georgia made a focal point in the spring a year ago, but probably during the season, maybe altered that goal a little bit, stopped emphasizing that, at least in the public remarks, as much as they were near the beginning of the season. Nolan Smith thinks this Dan Lanning defense this year can get a lot more of those kinds of plays. Do you believe him?
I think so. And I think, here's what everybody, this is a very popular issue, especially in the Dog Nation forum. A lot of good takes on that. I think my kind of marriage or synergy of all these points going on is, Brandon, if I could give you a little hocus pocus right here, and I can give you 30 sacks from Georgia's starters in the front seven, would you take it right now? Because I think 30 sacks from those guys, another top 5 defense, maybe, when you have more of an offense and you start putting points on people, then you make that offense one-dimensional where you can pin those ears back. I know Belichick would shudder to hear a lot of that stuff with the Church of Gap integrity and everything else like that. But if you tell me you can get 7 from Aziz, 5 from Jordan, 5 from Trayvon Walker, you're already at 17. And then between Nolan and Jermaine Johnson, you can get another 15 sacks between those guys. If you can get that type of pressure from this Georgia front, and everybody remembers that, maybe the easiest way to play defense against somebody is when you have them behind the sticks, when you have them second and long, you have them in third and long and everything else like that, because you make it very predictable. And you also tell them to throw into the face of us Georgia's strength. We touched on it last week, and I think this is the marriage point I'm going to make. When you have a Georgia defensive depth chart scheme where you have A-plus players and you have excellent players at every level, there's no longer any part of the scheme you're going to have to cover for or try to limit or try to hide with Georgia. I mean, I'm going to tell you this, Brandon. If they get Azeez Ojulari to 8 sacks and Nolan Smith to 8 sacks and Jermaine Johnson to 8, notice I'm not saying 13 or 14 or anything crazy like that, but they might be playing longer games and more snaps because this is an SEC schedule where they might have to play more 4-quarter games. I'm going to tell you what, if they show that much pressure and that much havoc, especially in terms of getting to the quarterback, I think it will turn the dial all the way up for the prospects of the 2021 recruiting cycle. Brandon, you can bet those shiny new red britches that Corey Foreman wants to see Nolan Smith have about 10 sacks this year. And if that happens, the chances of him becoming a Bulldog spike way up.
Yeah, Mike, I think the point that Jeff's making is a good one. Here's the thing that concerns me just a little bit, though.
Which point? I lost track on about the 5th point in that diatribe.
That TED Talk. The overarching point, though, that
energy, baby.
That's exactly right. The overarching point, this could be a better year for the pass rush. Here's where I get a little concerned, though. Last year, I think once this team realized they weren't going to score as many points as they would like to against the better teams they were playing, I think the defense got more conservative. The same way that some people think of Kirby Smart as kind of a conservative-minded coach and the influence that might have on the offense. I think Kirby Smart's also at times a conservative-minded coach in terms of his approach to defense as well. Mike, I'm not sure how big of a baseball fan you are, but it almost seemed to me like last year at the second half of the season, final 2/3 of the season, Georgia became a defense that was playing with the infield in, looking to give up as few runs as it possibly could, knowing that one run might beat them in a certain situation, to belabor the baseball analogy a little bit. And ultimately, I think that made the Georgia defense less dynamic than it could have been. And I do think when you look at national champions in a kind of a typical 15-game season, you see those 40-plus sack numbers. I'm not going to do the math in my head about how the exchange rate would go with just 10 SEC games, but you do see big sack numbers, typically speaking, from national champions. Last year's LSU, probably not quite so much. I think the struggles on offense last season impacted this team's ability to be as aggressive in the backfield as they maybe would have liked to have been. And if we see offensive struggles near the beginning of this year as well, my fear, at least to a degree, is that same blueprint on defense might duplicate itself.
Well, I think the way Kirby Smart approaches it, I mean, I think we would all agree that the perfect defense is one that's solid against the run and yet doesn't give up the big play. And that's exactly what Georgia did. They were number 1 in the nation against the run, and yet they didn't give up any plays longer than 40 yards the final 6 games. I mean, Georgia is going to make you earn it. If you're going to go on an 80-yard drive, folks, you're not doing it in one play or 3 plays. You're going to have to go 7, 11, 13. So what does that mean? It means that you're going to rely on your front 4 to get pressure without bringing the blitz. Because when you bring the blitz, somebody's open, and Georgia's saying, we ain't giving you that. And when we rush, we're not going to have our guys spinning and looping and doing all these crazy things that could open rush lanes. We're going to have gap integrity. And when we rush, we're going to rush vertically upfield and stay in our lanes so that those big plays can't pop out. Now, that's not as dynamic and not as effective in creating sacks, but what it does do is it eliminates the possibilities for the big plays that you see when a back squirts through a hole. I mean, think about it. When's the last time against a Kirby Smart defense you saw a running back hit the line of scrimmage and just go, oh my gosh, he's off to the races? There's always a body there. And part of what you give up is some of that dynamic rush element and that on the blitz.
Connor, what do you think?
Well, I've had time to formulate some stats with the 2 lengthy answers that I had. But to BA's point about playing conservative, especially on the defensive side, the 2 games last year where Georgia had its most sacks and tackles for loss were against Tennessee, which occurred, I think, before the wheels really fell off on that offensive side of the ball, and that Baylor game at the end of the year when Georgia really had nothing to lose and it allowed itself to play a little bit more aggressive. I do think that last season, knowing the sort of difficulties they had on the offensive side of the ball, played into how they played on defense. And I ultimately think that while, yes, it's easy and fun to talk up about getting more sacks and doing the math, I think in a 10-game season, you're probably looking for about 28 sacks to meet that same quote-unquote 40-sack threshold mark there. It's fun to talk about that. Ultimately, and I think Jordan Davis was asked this question, how well the offense plays is going to factor into my opinion, how much the defense sort of goes out there and creates havoc and creates pressure. And specifically, we can look back to the Auburn game last year where Georgia was very, I wouldn't necessarily say aggressive, but they were creating havoc plays early in that game, got up to a big 21-0 lead, I believe. And then they got conservative towards the end of the game because they figured 21 points is enough. We're going to try and make this Auburn team drive the length of the field. And they did it twice, and they made that game a lot closer as opposed to Georgia just sort of staying aggressive over the course of 4 quarters because of its offense. So ultimately, I think how aggressive this Georgia pass rush is, the talent's there. I believe if they wanted to play that way every game, they could get to that 28 sack mark. The talent is there. These guys are good enough. This defensive coaching staff is good enough to scheme it up there. But the larger point for me is always going to be how much does this offense allow this defense to play as aggressive as it really wants?
Jeff, to go back to your point here really quickly, you're talking about, how you get to a total that works for you by the end of the season, whatever that would be in a 10-game SEC-only schedule. Azeez Ojulari last year was the only player in this Georgia roster to have more than 2.5 sacks. So to ask a bunch of guys who may have had 2.5 a year ago to get to 8 this upcoming year, that might be asking a lot from them. But asking a guy who had 2.5 to give you 5, asking a guy who had 2.5 to give you 6, one way or another, your best way to get to a total is to have a, conglomeration of guys kind of add to that. I don't know that it's one guy bursting forth and having a Derek Barnett type year or,
Jarvis
David
Jones.
Jarvis Jones type year. That's not exactly what I see on this team right now, but a handful of guys essentially doubling what they did a year ago, I don't think that's asking too much. And I think that if Georgia has an impressive total by the end of the season, I would say that's probably about how you get there.
So let me go quick because I'm going to have an egg timer answer between diatribe part 1, diatribe part 2, and diatribe part 3. Here's what I see. This team's going to be better, Brandon. What I mean by that is more Georgia Bulldogs taking a leap from year 1 to year 2. That's Trayvon Walker. That's having Jalen Carter in the front. That's another year of Devontae Wyatt. Another year of Nolan Smith. I think the big thing for Georgia is they need to see Azeez Ojulari transfer those 38 hurries into about maybe 8 more sacks out of that, or maybe 6 more sacks out of that. That's only 6 out of 38. And you look at a guy like Devontae Wyatt, the guys that can crush the pocket from inside. That's going to be a bigger batter. Trayvon Walker, Jalen Carter, Devontae Wyatt also had over 30 hurries as well. Those guys need to get to the passer maybe 20% more of the time. And I think those sack numbers will rise accordingly.
Mike, I'll give you the
Brandon,
last one. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Mike, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm looking at I'm looking at the snaps per game. One of the other things that really helps out defensive statistics is when your defense stinks. You take a look at the tackle leaders. It's always somebody from Vanderbilt or Kentucky because they're always on the field. And conversely, Georgia is a team that likes to run a lot of ball control on offense and really run the clock. So they're not really on the field a whole lot, and that contributes to some of those numbers. You know, I look at this: Georgia 81st in the country in snaps per game. So there's 80 teams that are playing more snaps, and that 81 snaps, most of those are going to be, you know, that's on offense. So they're taking time off the clock. You know, time of possession is something that Kirby is very aware of. When you play explosive teams, the best defense is to keep them off the field. I know that people get bored with a running game and such, but part of that is by design to control the clock and to disrupt the tempo of the other team. You know, that's why LSU was the only team in the nation that Georgia played that scored more than 2 touchdowns on them last year. So how much of that changes? I think it depends on the offense. Again, if it's Dwan Mathis, then I think you see a little bit more ball control. And I think if it's JT Daniels, then you see a little bit more of that air raid and spread the ball around.
It's Cover 4 Live, presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Mike Griffith, Jeff Sintel, Connor Raleigh. My name is Brandon Adams. Let's keep things going here. And Mike, I want to stay with you for a moment because this week we saw your old stomping grounds, the Big Ten, make quite a piece of news, essentially totally reversing course on the initial decision that they said would not be revisited. And then they do revisit and essentially change their mind. They're coming back to play. They're going to have an 8-game season that coincides with the championship the same day as the SEC championship on December the 19th. I have told you guys in this show before that when the Big Ten, the Pac-12 were not playing, I did not think the national champion deserved an asterisk. But now that you have leagues playing a different amount of games than the rest of college football, if one of them were to win the national championship, I'm not quite so sure the asterisk doesn't come back into the discussion again. Mike, before I get you, Connor, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to tee Mike up on this one. Is this season hollow?
Wow. You know, it bugs me a little bit that the Big Ten champion is only going to have to play 8 games, whereas an SEC champ looks like they're going to have to play 11, right? Now, there are no bye games or bye weeks or vacant weekends. I know some people get hung up on the bye word on I don't want to upset any of our Dog Nation followers. Bye game, off weekend.
What's wrong with bye?
There's some people that say
has cancel culture come for the word bye?
Cancel culture hasn't come for it yet. There are some people out there who from time to time like to state that it is not actually a bye.
But what? Take 2 seconds and explain this to me like I'm 5 years old.
Okay. Bye indicates that you have an off week as in advancing to play somebody else, like in a tournament style.
Right.
It's really
that's true. One definition.
Boy, those people sound like they'd be a ton of fun to hang around with.
Yeah.
Mike, please I didn't mean to take your point away. Go ahead.
They also catch all my typos and make sure to post, and that keeps them busy. Believe me. No, I the 8 game, but you know what? There's also less of a margin for error because in the Big Ten, if you're COVID positive, you're out 21 days. In the SEC, you're out 10 days, and anybody associated with you is out 14. Also, they've got this 5% threshold where if more than 5% of a team is COVID-19 out or affected, they don't play. Guys, if I were a betting guy, and I guess it is Cover 4, so Brandon, I'm going to take this over. I'm going to ask this question.
Please.
I want to know, do you guys believe there will be a football team in one of the Power 5 conferences that does not finish the season because of COVID-19?
That is a great question, Mike. That's a great question. I guess I believe the answer is probably no. Even as stringent as the Big Ten rules sound, something tells me there's got to be a way around these, or maybe better said, a way to mitigate those factors a little bit. I don't think we get to there with a team, not playing. I don't. We saw baseball do that early and then they bounced. Go ahead, Jeff.
Like what happens, guys, if this thing happens in the championship game weekend for the Big Ten or when they're in the college football playoff and everything else like that? Do you bring in the runner-up or the alternate or the understudy into the bracket?
My prediction is an antigen test gets flushed down a toilet. It's my prediction, but
let's also consider this. We've seen guys opt out before the season. What happens when Ole Miss is 2-5 or when Vanderbilt is 0-7? Are there players that say, you know what, I'm out of here, and now you're down to 60 scholarship players? And Vanderbilt to me is the team. I'm throwing up the B. I think Vanderbilt, Jeff's like a Jeff move, wasn't it? That was like I'm going with the B, and it doesn't mean Victor, guys. Dadgummit. I think Vanderbilt is not. They would be the team that I don't think is going to finish the season.
I don't know about the whole team, but the other point that Mike brings up, Connor, is one that I'm very concerned about, that college football practice is just really hard. And, I think that more so than we realize, guys just get burned out over the course of a long year. When you don't have a championship to play for, I am a little bit afraid that some players, and it's not even necessarily Georgia players, because I don't want to see other college football players doing this either because I love the sport so much. I'm afraid that we'll see more opt-outs during the season because the grind just kind of stinks for people.
Yeah, that is, I think, certainly a worry here. The 0-7 Vanderbilts, the Arkansas say, hey, let's just roll back, protect our guys, make sure everyone is healthy going into the offseason and prepare for a 2021 where we might be better off. I think that is a real concern. We kind of got into it just a minute ago with the hypotheticals. Well, what if a Big Ten team, what if a Wisconsin or Ohio State, it goes over that 5% threshold and has to sit out? And I'm just sort of burnt out with the hypothetical talk, which is why I'm not necessarily a fan of the Big Ten specifically so far coming back, because it only intensifies it. And at the end of the year, I think there's a very reasonable scenario that exists where let's say you have a 7-1 SEC or an 8-1 Big Ten champion. They won their Big Ten. Ohio State wins the Big Ten. They lost to Penn State and they win the rest of their games. They're 8-1. Let's say you have an 8-3 Georgia team where they went 8-2 in the regular season. They somehow lost in the SEC championship game. Who are you putting in that SEC or in that college football playoff spot? Because I believe winning 8 out of 11 SEC games is a tougher ask than winning 8 out of 9 Big Ten games.
I agree with you, but I don't think the SEC team, a second SEC team, is getting a benefit of the doubt. I don't think that. I think the Big Ten's presence in the playoff discussion, I think, means it's a lot more likely you see 4 teams from 4 different leagues make the playoff. Now, this was a big argument last week, and Mike was emphatic a week ago, Connor, that he didn't think 2 SEC teams were making it when there were 3 Power 5 leagues playing. I disagreed with that then. I thought there were what's the verb I'm looking for here? There was a pretty good path to 2 SEC teams in the playoff and a 3, Power 5, conference league year. But with the Big Ten coming back, even with the kind of Mickey Mouse schedule that it's playing, the Big Ten champions making the college football playoff, whether I think they should or not. And if SEC Team B goes whatever record you want to say and just misses it by an eyelash, it's a story they can tell their grandkids, but the college football playoff selection committee don't want to hear it. And that's just the way
how
it
it's
is.
been.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's the way it is. And I think because the money is involved in the college football playoff, they're going to be motivated to get the most parts of the country involved in this. That way they can sort of rake back some of the money they figure to lose this season.
Mike, how about you? You had a lot of thoughts on that last week. I mean, it seems awful hard for me to see a 2, SEC bid into the playoff with the presence of these at least additional extra Power 5, if not both the Power 5s that weren't playing, now thinking about trying to get back into it.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Brandon. Last week I thought maybe one of those, non-Power 5 conferences could sneak in there, but now, to me, I'm in agreement that the Big Ten. Who knows? Maybe the Pac-12 will come out with a 5-game schedule, and Oregon will go 5-0. All that Nike money, and get the Ducks in there.
It's like some of those Alabama national champions that were like 4-1 in like 1892 or something like that.
I have a hot Pac-12 take.
Please.
I believe that is for the Pac-12's best interest. If it actually right now says, hey, we're not going to play and we're going to actually go and do a spring football league. Corner the market on spring football. You don't have a playoff, but you can still have your season-end champion. You can play that game in the Rose Bowl. I think it'd be a chance to recapture because, again, there are enough college football fans out there watching Central Arkansas, South Alabama, whatever that first game was. If you put legitimate Power 5 teams out there in the spring, I think people are going to watch. I think it's going to help rebuild some of the Pac-12's brand, which it desperately needs. And I think there'll be a market there for that. And which they have not done to this point at all, follow their own instincts. Do what is best for them instead of just following the Big Ten in this situation.
So I perhaps have an even hotter take than that. Not to be a story topper, but I don't really think they want
Brandon Adams.
I don't think they really want to play. So the perfect solution is they should just say they're returning, and then late on Saturday night they should just start dropping scores of like games that were supposedly played like late on a Saturday night that people like me were already in bed and didn't see. It'd be 7 or 8 weeks before any of us figured out they were lying. Cal beat Stanford 38-31. That sounds about right. Put it on the board. I mean, they should just start releasing scores for these games that supposedly were played late on a Saturday night. I think that'd be a fine idea.
One more thing I want to throw out there. I mean, how diabolical if the Big Ten planned all along an 8-game schedule and said, we really need to sell this cancel thing. But the thing that I found outlandish, and I don't know the response, there was a columnist that said this was the darkest day in Big Ten history. I mean, is there anybody that can find any shred of logic in that statement? Because there's been some pretty bad days in the Big Ten with Jerry Sandusky.
You've been hanging around too many. You've been hanging around too many Medill and Michigan grads to be giving the Big Ten that sort of credit there.
Yeah,
it's unbelievable. I mean, yes, you said it, Connor.
Hey, let me ask you this, Mike. Before we change the subject, I want to take some comments before we're done. So, if the Pac-12, which honestly I have no idea what they're about to do. But it seems hard to imagine they could play games on the week of, October 24th, which is when the Big Ten is going to start. In fact, their Pac-12 coaches are saying they don't want to do that. They don't think they can get ready. I think some of them don't even know where the players are at this point. If they were to start later, Halloween, first Saturday in November, do you think the playoff committee would have the guts to tell them they're not eligible for the playoff? Because there's no way they'd say that to the Big Ten. Would they have the guts to tell the Pac-12 that it's sort of like late for the, if you get to the airport 45 minutes less before the flight takes off, they tell you can't get on board. Would they ever have the guts just tell the Pac-12, I'm sorry, you're not eligible for the playoff? You didn't get your ducks in a row fast enough, no pun intended.
It's the four. Oh, boy. You didn't get your ducks. That's pretty good. My goodness. They would need a Trojan horse to get into the playoffs.
There you go.
Good grief. I'll tell you, they would it says 4 best teams, right? It comes down to that, so it's going to be the Eager Beavers that started the season ahead of the Pac-12 that have the opportunity to get in. I think it would be a cardinal sin if a team that played less than 8 games were to get into the.
Mike, I'm actually pretty impressed with that. That was a pretty good run for you right there. You got a lot of those nicknames.
In the details. It's really, I think, a bear market this year for college football, and it's brewing up to be a really interesting storm there.
I knew that was coming.
Love to see a season completed and 5 power conference teams playing. And
Connor, you really think they can buffalo the college football playoff committee on this?
That's pretty good, y'all. That's pretty good.
Hey,
all right, that's
guys. Are we talking about a real league yet? Because I'm just abstaining from this Pac-12 discussion because I only talk about football on this program.
All right, well, Jeff, you'll like this part better. It's our cover more. We've done the cover 4. Now it's time to move into cover more. Give you guys a chance to weigh in on the content that you wanted to hear that you haven't had a chance to hear yet on both our Facebook and YouTube comment section. We'll take a couple of comments before we get out the door here on a Thursday night. Jeff Sentel, yes, sir.
Yeah, I got one. And again, this is inform. And maybe I'm too busy counting up Georgia's silent commitments in the 2021 class, but I must have missed this. How in the dickens are these guys that signed with an agent last week able to opt back into the college football season when I'm sure signing with an agent used to mean, what, you're going to return the money, you're going to return the check, and this is allowed? Does anybody else see a little shades of Todd Gurley in a jersey or whatever? Does anybody see anything wrong with these guys going pro last week and then opting back in this week?
I don't care about that. Like Cade Mays, I don't want to play, but I don't mind if Micah Parsons plays.
Do we know that like Sean Wade and Wyatt Davis, the 2 Ohio State players in question, do we know they officially signed with an agent? Is there a signature?
You know who reported this was Albert Breer, and honestly, I can't remember. I'm pretty sure in Davis' case he did not, but Breer contacted NFLPA. There's a role for all of this, and he looked to see who had. There were a handful of Big Ten guys who did. The honest truth is I can't remember any of them, but he also reported on the non-Big Ten players that also signed that agent, and according to his reporting, Jamie Newman was not one of them to the extent that matters at all.
My thing with this is I don't fault guys for, even if they didn't have to, whatever they have to do to get back in, because the Big Ten took this hardline stance saying we are not renegotiating this. We are not turning this oil tank around.
Right.
And it turned out it was some little dinghy that they could flip around really quickly. So I don't have an issue with players who have said they opted out, opting back in when the Big Ten, which said it wasn't going to change its mind, ended up doing just that.
Fully expect Jeremy Pruitt in Tennessee to get Jamie Newman eligible for this season, by the way.
Don't confuse people.
At least he didn't say
That's the only thing people remember for the show.
At least don't say Sewell from Oregon, man. That would be a really haymaker, bringing in the future number 1 tackle, number 2 pick in the draft, getting him eligible.
But let's take a couple cover more comments. John William Adams says to agree with something that folks said a moment ago. Let the kids back. It's a wild year. Yeah, I would say, the guys that opted out, let them come back in. By the way, LSU's had guys opting in, opting out. It's like a turnstile there in Baton Rouge. So if they can do that.
Does that mean Jamar Chase can come back in? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
If he didn't sign with an agent, I have no issue with that.
Yeah.
Well, James Franklin, by the way, on the subject of guys, he said that he actually spoke pretty candidly about this today. The guys that opted out more recently, he was a lot more willing to listen to than guys that opted out a long time ago. Obviously, their first opt-out, I believe, is Micah Parsons, who's probably their best player on defense. One of the best players on the team, at any position. So it sounds like the longer you've been opted out, the less likely some of these coaches are to want to bring them back. Mike Griffith, for you, Shelton Tucker says Georgia needs to pass the ball to Zamir White more. We heard Zamir in that video that Georgia released not too long ago. Zamir talked about wanting to be a better ball catcher. We think of James Cook being that, but I think that Zamir – what are you laughing at, Connor?
You're just teeing Mike up for here, and I can't wait to see what he has to say.
But no, this is a relevant topic. But Zamir said he wants to catch the ball more, didn't he?
Mike, you want to take
He does need to catch the ball more if they're going to – yeah, I mean, he does need to catch the ball more if this offense is going to be effective. You can't look at it and go, well, Zamir White's in the game, so it's a run. James White is in a game, so it's a pass. And I will say in the 30 minutes of the scrimmage that I caught accidentally from the bridge, scrimmage 2, I saw Zamir White catch it. It was quite accidental. I had my Dog Nation mask on and everything. Zamir White caught a pass, and he looked good in the open field. So I fully expect Zamir to catch some passes this year, particularly when they go into the air raid mode. I think he'll be running more read option. He'll be more heavily used. For your fantasy football lineup against Arkansas, Zamir is the running back in the backfield to start over James Cook. But when Daniels is playing, Cook is the guy. It's kind of like that deal they got with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb in Cleveland. So when it's a predominant run game plan, your guy is Zamir White. And I think Zamir White's going to be your guy at Arkansas.
By the way, speaking of Nick Chubb, and we got to get ready to go, Connor, today, O.J. Simpson on Twitter went on a rant about how he wants to see Nick Chubb more involved in the Browns offense. How scared would you be if O.J. Simpson knew your name?
Look, O.J. Simpson, terrible human being, well-regarded. But we know that he loves fantasy football. Unfortunately, in this situation, our ideals need to be aligned. I drafted Nick Chubb. I was all in. He was second in the league in rushing last year. And it's not his fault that Cleveland is a dumpster fire. I think sometimes individuals can't uplift entire structures working against them, and that's what's happening with the Cleveland Browns. But, we talked about good karma, good juju going out earlier. Nick Chubb, if you were seeing this, I have absolute faith and belief in you that you're going to be a great player, that you're going to make a difference for the Cleveland Browns against the Cincinnati Bengals tonight, and you're going to have a fantastic game along with every game the rest of this season.
All right, a couple more real quickly here. John Benton. Jeff, this is for you because you brought up the Havoc thing a little earlier. John says, one of our great commenters, just like the defense can be more aggressive when it's third and long, they can also be more aggressive when they know the offense can score points. It'll be a game changer if our offense can be more explosive. Don't you agree with John on that, Jeff, that that havoc rate goes up when the offense is instilling confidence in this coaching staff, right?
I think the way Kirby Smart looked at this team last year is he knew this team wasn't going to consistently score 24, 31 points a game in the SEC. So what they did is they tried to reduce the ability for the opponent to put 2 scores, an extra score up on the board. I think if they can sling it around and make plays, you hear a lot about, I'd love to hear what Mike thought from that accidental tour he took across the bridge with a telescope and some his go-go gadget night vision goggles or whatever. But I want to say this, you guys, and you're hearing a little bit of this. Do you think it's more Georgia's offensive line, new pieces, new line coach, new faces, or is it that havoc rearing its head and just kind of going through and storming the gates on that? I think it's more right now, the early indicators for me is I think it's more to Georgia's defensive line and front good than it is largely onto the offensive front's bad.
I just want to see this team play with a little more hot sauce this year. I want some sacks. I want some tackles for loss. I want some explosive plays offensively. I'm not saying that Georgia's been boring, but there is a certain blandness to some of this. And Mike's going to say, well, it's worked out to the tune of a lot of wins. And that's right. It really has. And yet, to use a baseball analogy again, the toughest outs to get are 25, 26, 27. The toughest wins to get in the college football season are the ones that you play at the end of the year. And I just think a little bit of hot sauce probably helps with that. A little more exciting defense, a little more exciting offense, a little bit more explosive plays. It just so happens the teams that are winning national championships are pretty dadgum fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm on board
Brandon,
with that.
would you rather see 1,100 receiving yards for Pickens or 11 sacks for Georgia's sack leader in 2020?
I got to think about that. Let me let Mike make his point, and I'll think about that.
Yeah, I think that there could be more plays made. I thought the linebacking core was particularly derelict in their duties last year. I didn't think there were enough plays made in terms of sacks or interceptions. I think this year, I think that's where Nakobe Dean really helps out. I think he's that playmaker. And I also think Monty Rice. I think this is year 3 for Monty. I expect big things. And with that great defensive front, and I really do believe this could be the best defensive front in the SEC, that should free these linebackers up to make more plays, BA.
Okay, let me quickly answer Jeff's question. I want one more comment, then we got to go. We've got to get these shows up here a little soon.
That's right. Nick Chubb might get another yard.
Yeah, exactly. Jeff, if you're giving me the choice of 1,100 yards or 11 sacks, 11 sacks is a lot, but 1,100 yards is a ton. I'll take the receiving yards in that particular case. So the final comment belongs to Rhett Womack, who says, Jeff, tell him to shut up and let you bring the gas on recruiting. So before we go, bring some gas on some recruiting here for a moment.
Let me see. What's the thing we need to fill up with some 93 octane right there? I would say Brock Vandegrift's doing a very good job being the Dalai Lama of recruiting, the tour guide especial. I wonder if sometimes the Georgia staff takes a look at things and goes, all those man hours we used to spend on the road, all those charter jet flights, all those things we used to go see, talk to the guidance counselor, talk to the cafeteria workers, talk to all the coaches, talk to the science teacher. I wonder if they're going to look at this class as it comes together and start wondering, man, what's actually necessary, what's not necessary. I put this in the forum yesterday, and this is something everybody to put underneath your pillow and go to sleep at night, because I know Brandon's going to sleep in about 9 minutes. But for me, Georgia could not be in a better spot right now, here in the mid-September for Mason Smith and Corey Foreman than they actually are. I cannot imagine Georgia being in a better spot for those two young men than they are right now in the class of 2021. And for Mike, I know Connor knows it, and I know Brandon knows it. You're talking about the number 1 overall recruit, another basically a bigger Nolan Smith. This guy's about 6'5", 250 instead of 6'3", 235. Corey Foreman's going to be a top 10 pick somewhere for somebody, and he definitely wants to play. I'm believing in both those young men when they say that they're going to play together in the same school. I'd look at Georgia's commitment board. I think everybody just saw a recent decommitment from Elijah Judy. I'm not going to say that should end up being bad news for Georgia fans at all. I know a lot of people on Twitter were wondering, what's going on? What's wrong with Georgia recruiting? I think it's more of an example of what's right with Georgia recruiting. And I also wouldn't be shocked if another committed name on that board doesn't sign with the Bulldogs as well. And it kind of feel like 2018 where Georgia goes and finds a better player than the young man that was filling that slot for the nation's number 1, number 2 class. So that's enough gas for tonight.
I'll give you something to think about, Jeff, before we say goodbye. I think there may be as many as 2 recruiting stories that I may have tagged the toe on at one point in time that I may be looking to bring back from the dead. There may be as many
Undertaker style, huh?
There may be as many as 2 Undertaker raise-ups of guys that we have long since stopped talking about that I don't know. Now, some of this is just dumb internet stuff, but there are a couple of names that we have not talked about that I assume we had given hospice care to that I think may be ready to start being talked about, at least possibly again.
Some great news here to end the show. Nick Chubb just scored a touchdown.
There you go. Never doubt the juice when it comes to fantasy football. Mike Griffith, give me a final thought before we say goodbye.
I think it's an exciting time for Georgia football. There was a lot of great news. I saw Kirby Smart made a $1 million donation today. That's pretty fantastic. I know a lot of people say, the SEC coaches didn't give up part of their salaries like other coaches across the country. But, for Kirby to dig in his pocket and give $1 million for a great cause is big. The uniforms, exciting news. You've got the snub effect in for the no-name defense. Once again, only 2 guys make first team despite being the best defense in the league and returning 80% of the production. So, Connor Riley with some great stories on Jordan Davis and Nolan Smith, 2 of the most exciting young players in the league. So there's been a lot of good news. And And for the Georgia fan that just looks for something to get ticked off about, the whole Cade Mays things, it's like, can you believe that? So today I thought we had the full complement of news stories, and fans had the pleasure of a daily double of Brandon Adams.
That's
so
right.
You didn't just get him once, you got him twice. There's nothing. What more could you want on a Thursday?
I'd love to see somebody in Connecticut watching us, a website that covers Georgia football, scrambling to cover a uniform announcement the way that we were today. That would be quite a culture shock for someone who lives outside of our region on that, for sure. But it was fun to be able to talk to some folks live on video when the uniform situation dropped. Connor, you got anything you want to say before we go?
Nope, you done? Have a great weekend.
All right, see you guys. Cover 4 Live presented by Georgia Farm Bureau. Huge thanks to them making it possible. I'll see you tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily. Back here again next Thursday, and by that time, we're getting very close to the start of the upcoming season. We'll start trying to make these shows a little shorter, too, kind of keep so you guys can get back to your life on Thursday night. Hey, we'll talk to you then. Thanks for being here. Cover 4 Live presented by Georgia Farm Bureau.